You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong way. You've probably had this thought before. Maybe I'm just too much. Maybe you've been sitting with someone you care about, your partner, your friend, even your family, and you felt this tightening in your chest when you wanted something from them. Not money, not gifts, just time, presence, effort. And yet, every time you asked, it came out wrong. You either sounded needy or demanding, or maybe you stayed quiet altogether and hoped they'd notice without you saying anything. Then when they didn't, it hurt twice as much. And in that pain, your mind whispered, maybe I'm the problem, maybe I just expect too much. But what if you're not? What if the problem isn't that your needs are too big, but that the way you're expressing them isn't landing? What if the real issue isn't you being too much, but that you've been speaking a language the other person can't understand? Think about it. Have you ever traveled somewhere where no one spoke your language? You try to ask for directions, for food, for help, but the words don't connect. You point, you gesture, you repeat yourself louder, and still nothing. After a while, frustration builds, and you might even give up, convincing yourself, forget it, I'll figure it out alone. That's exactly what happens in relationships. You're speaking a need, but not in a way the other person can hear. And because they can't hear it, you start thinking you shouldn't have asked at all. You see, most of us were never taught how to ask for what we need in a healthy, clear, and loving way. We were taught silence. We were taught to tough it out. Or on the other extreme, we were taught to demand, to explode, when we couldn't hold it in anymore. Neither silence nor explosions build closeness, they build distance. And then we sit in that distance, blaming ourselves for being too much. Let me ask you, how many times have you hinted at something, dropped clues, hoping the other person would pick up on it? Maybe you said it would be nice if we spent more time together, but what you really meant was, I feel lonely, and I miss you. Maybe you said I don't need anything for my birthday, but what you really meant was, I want to feel seen, celebrated, like I matter to you. But because you didn't say it that way, they missed it. They thought you were fine, and inside, you crumbled a little more. Here's the truth you need to hold on to. You are not asking for too much. Wanting connection is not too much. Wanting respect is not too much. Wanting to feel valued, chosen, prioritized, that is the most human thing in the world. The problem is that somewhere along the way, you stopped believing you were allowed to ask for it directly. Somewhere, someone made you feel like your needs were a burden. And ever since, you've been carrying that fear into every conversation. And maybe right now, you're remembering specific moments. A time you asked a parent for attention and got dismissed. A time you asked a friend for support and they brushed you off. A time you asked a partner to show up differently and they made you feel like you were nagging. Those memories leave scars, and those scars whisper lies. Don't ask again. Don't rock the boat. Don't be too much. But deep down, the ache is still there. You still long for what you never got. And that longing doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. Now here's where the shift begins. Imagine if instead of shrinking your needs, instead of translating them into half statements or silence, you learned how to voice them in a way that could actually be heard. Imagine if you could ask without fear, without shame, and instead of rejection, you received understanding. That would change everything. Because here's another truth. People can't meet needs they don't know about. And they can't meet needs they don't understand. You may have been hinting, sighing, holding your hurt like a banner you hoped someone would notice. But unless you give it words they can digest, it often gets lost. Think of it like this. You're thirsty, and instead of saying I need water, you say the air feels dry. The person next to you nods and keeps scrolling on their phone. You sigh louder, hoping they'll get it. They don't. Eventually you burst out, why don't you ever care about me? And suddenly, what could have been a simple exchange, I need water, can you get me a glass, becomes a fight about caring, attention, and neglect. Not because your thirst was too much, but because it was never clearly spoken. And that's what happens in your relationship. When you bury your needs under silence, or disguise them as hints, you rob yourself of the chance to actually have them met. And when they go unmet, you spiral. You tell yourself stories that make the distance feel even bigger. If they loved me, they'd just know. If I mattered, I wouldn't have to ask. If I were enough, I wouldn't feel this empty. Those stories cut deeper than the unmet need itself. But what if the truth is simpler? What if you've just been asking in the wrong way? I want you to pause for a moment and notice the weight you've been carrying around this. Notice how often your mind plays that tape. I'm too much. I shouldn't need this. I should be stronger. And I want you to challenge it right now. Because you wouldn't call a child too much for asking to be hugged. You wouldn't call a friend too much for asking you to listen when they're hurting. You wouldn't call your pet too much for running to you for comfort. So why do you say it to yourself? The truth is, you've been carrying other people's projections. Someone made you feel like your needs were inconvenient because they didn't know how to meet them. That was about them, not you. And yet you made it about you. You shrunk. You silenced. You learned to settle. And every time you settle, a little part of you feels unseen, unheard, unloved. But you're here now, and you're listening because some part of you is ready to break that pattern. Some part of you knows you can't keep living in the quiet ache of unmet need. You can't keep telling yourself you're too much, when in reality, you've just been misheard. So here's what we're going to do together. We're going to untangle this knot. We're going to walk through the ways you've been asking that haven't worked, and we're going to shift them. We're going to rebuild the bridge between what you feel and what you say, so that when you open your mouth, the person across from you actually understands. And when they understand, they have the chance to show up different. Think about the last time you held back what you truly wanted to say. You softened it, reshaped it, maybe even laughed it off, as if it didn't matter. But afterward, when you were alone, it did matter. It weighed on you. It played on repeat, in your mind like a song you couldn't turn off. Why didn't I just say it? Why didn't I tell them what I really needed? And that's the thing, when you bury your needs, they don't disappear. They echo inside you. They build pressure, like water behind a dam. And one day, the dam bursts. That burst might look like anger, like snapping over something small. Or it might look like distance, pulling away, shutting down. Either way, the person on the other side is left confused. They only saw calm. They only heard silence. And then suddenly they're hit with the storm. And once again, you're left feeling like the difficult one, like the one who asks for too much. But what if the storm isn't the problem? What if the silence before it is? When you stay silent about your needs, you're not protecting the relationship. You're starving it. Think of a fire. To keep it alive, you have to feed it wood, oxygen, care. Without that, the fire dies. Relationships work the same way. Needs are not threats, they're fuel. When voiced clearly, they feed connection, they bring closeness, they build trust. But when you silence them, the flame dims, and you sit in the dark wondering why the warmth is gone. You've probably been told at some point that real love doesn't need to be asked for, that if someone truly cared, they'd just know. But let's break that down honestly. How could they just know? How could someone else possibly understand the precise texture of your heart without you handing them the language? Love doesn't make people mind readers. Love makes them willing, and your clarity gives them direction. Let me paint it this way. Imagine you're on a road trip with someone. You're in the passenger seat. You know exactly where you want to go. But instead of saying, "Take a left here," you sit quietly, hoping they'll magically pick the right turn. They don't. You get lost, frustration builds, you start resenting them. Why can't you just get it? But the truth is, they couldn't because you never said it. You held the map the whole time, but refused to share it. That's what unspoken needs are, hidden map. And the longer you hide them, the more lost both of you become. And here's the cost. Every time you don't ask, every time you silence yourself, you reinforce the belief that your needs don't matter. You start to see yourself the way you fear others see you: too much, too needy, too complicated. That becomes the story you carry into every interaction. You edit yourself, you filter, you ask for less, and then even less, until one day, you realize you don't even recognize your own voice anymore. But here's the reality. Your voice is still there. It's been waiting under the surface, waiting for you to stop apologizing for existing. And that's where the shift has to happen inside you first. Because asking in the right way doesn't just mean choosing the right words. It means choosing to believe your needs are worthy of words at all. You might be wondering, but what if I ask and they reject me? What if I'm honest and they still don't care? That fear is real, and yes, it might happen. But listen closely. Rejection is not the enemy, silence is. When you ask and they refuse, you learn the truth about their capacity. When you don't ask, you stay trapped in a cycle of guessing, hoping, and hurting. Silence keeps you stuck. Honesty sets you free, even if the answer isn't what you wanted. Because at least then you know. At least then you're standing on truth, not illusion. Think back to someone who once dismissed your needs. Remember the sting of that moment. Now ask yourself, did the dismissal hurt more or the years of staying quiet afterward because of it? Often, it's not the rejection itself that breaks us, it's the story we build around it. The story that says, see, I knew I was too much, I should never ask again. But what if you flipped that story? What if instead it became, they couldn't give me what I needed? That doesn't mean I was wrong to need it. That means I deserve to find someone who can. That one shift changes everything, because it moves you from shame to clarity, from self-blame to self-respect. And when you operate from that place, your requests sound different. They're no longer desperate or hidden. They're steady, grounded, clear. Instead of hinting or exploding, you simply say, this is what I need. Can you give that to me? And if they can, you grow closer. If they can't, you walk away with dignity, not self-doubt. And maybe you're thinking, that sounds simple, but it's not easy. You're right. It's not easy. Because it requires unlearning years of silence, years of fear, years of making yourself small. But here's the beautiful part. You don't have to do it all at once. You can start small. You can start with one honest sentence. One clear request. One moment of saying what you really mean instead of watering it down. Imagine the next time you want something, whether it's more time together, a deeper conversation, or just a hug, you pause, breathe, and speak it plainly. No hinting, no shame, just truth. Do you feel that? That's power. Not power over the other person, but power within yourself. The power to stand in your own worth, without apology. Because here's the ultimate truth. Your needs are not demands. They're invitations. When you ask clearly, you're inviting someone into deeper connection with you. You're giving them the chance to show up, to meet you where you are, to love you in the way you need to be loved. And the ones who accept that invitation, those are the ones worth keeping close. So I want you to imagine your life 1 year from now if you chose this path. If instead of silencing, you voiced. If instead of doubting, you asked. If instead of shrinking, you stood tall in your truth. Imagine relationships where you no longer feel invisible, where you no longer carry resentment because your needs are unmet, where the people around you know exactly how to love you because you've shown them. That's not a fantasy. That's what's waiting for you the moment you stop believing you're too much and start asking the right way. And if a part of you is still whispering, but what if I lose people? Then let me ask you this. Is keeping people who can't meet you where you are really a gain? Or is it another kind of loss? One you've been disguising as love? Because true love doesn't ask you to shrink. True love doesn't punish you for needing. True love listens, responds, grows. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You are simply learning how to speak the language of your own heart and trusting that the right people will listen. So take a deep breath right now. Let yourself feel the possibility of that. A life where you no longer carry the weight of too much, but instead walk in the truth of enough. A life where your needs are spoken, understood, and often met. Not perfectly, not always, but enough to let you feel safe, seen, and loved. And it all begins here, with this simple but radical truth. You are not asking for too much. You're simply learning to ask in a way that can finally be heard. Think about how often you've replayed conversations in your head. You walk away, and hours later, you're still stuck on what you should have said. The right words finally come, but too late. You imagine how things might have been different if you'd spoken with more courage, more clarity. And the regret sits heavy, like a stone in your chest. That regret doesn't just come from the missed opportunity. It comes from betraying yourself in the moment. From knowing you had a truth inside you but choosing silence instead. And maybe you tell yourself, it wasn't the right time. They wouldn't have listened anyway. Maybe that's true. But if you're honest, most of the time it wasn't about them. It was about fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of rejection. Fear of hearing an answer you didn't want. Fear of being labeled as difficult or needy. And so you stayed quiet, hoping the relationship could survive without your voice. But here's the paradox. The very thing you thought would keep the relationship safe, silence, is the thing that slowly erodes it. Because intimacy is built on truth. Not the watered down version of you. Not the edited sentences you think will be easier to swallow. But the raw vulnerable truth. The kind that says, I need you in this way. Can you meet me here? That kind of honesty feels terrifying. But it's also the only path to real closeness. Anything less is performance. And performance can't hold a relationship together forever. You've probably felt the exhaustion of performance before. Smiling when you wanted to cry. Saying it's fine when it wasn't. Pretending to be low maintenance because you thought that made you lovable. But deep down, you knew it wasn't sustainable. Because pretending might win you temporary peace. But it costs you long-term peace. And the longer you pretend, the further you drift from yourself. Let me ask you, when did you first learn that asking for what you need was dangerous? Was it as a child, when your parents brushed off your feeling? Was it in a past relationship, where every request was turned into an argument? Was it in friendships where vulnerability was met with mockery instead of care? Somewhere along the way, you learned to associate asking with punishment, and ever since, you've been trying to survive on crumbs, small gestures, half answers, unspoken hopes. But survival is not the same as love. And crumbs are not the same as connection. Imagine if you stopped accepting crumbs. Imagine if, instead of twisting yourself into knots to make your needs smaller, you laid them down openly. Yes, it would feel risky. Yes, it would feel exposed. But it would also be liberating. Because even if the answer wasn't what you hoped, you would know. You would finally be free from the cycle of hinting, hoping, and hurting. There's a freedom that comes with truth, even painful truth, that silence can never give you. Silence traps you in uncertainty. Silence feeds the story in your head that says, if I were enough, they would just know. But spoken truth, whether it's embraced or rejected, gives you clarity. And clarity is power. Here's something most people don't realize. Clarity and comfort rarely come together. You can have clarity, or you can have comfort, but often not both. Silence feels comfortable in the moment, but it leaves you confused and resentful. Honesty feels uncomfortable in the moment, but it leaves you clear and empowered. The choice is yours, temporary comfort or lasting clarity. Which one are you willing to choose? Let's be real, you can't control how someone will respond to your honesty. You can't control whether they'll rise to meet you or shrink away, but you can control whether you give them the chance to even try. By speaking your needs clearly, you hand them the opportunity to love you better. Without that, they're guessing. And more often than not, they'll guess wrong. Think about someone in your life right now, someone you wish understood you better. Now be honest. Have you really told them what you need in a way they can understand? Or have you been waiting for them to read between the lines? If the answer is the second, then maybe the problem isn't that they don't care. It's that they've never been given the chance to truly know. And yes, there will be people who, even after hearing you clearly, still won't care, still won't change, still won't meet you. That hurts, but it's also information. It tells you exactly what you're dealing with. It shows you whether the relationship has space to grow, or whether it's time to let go. Either way you win, because clarity is always a win. So let's strip away the lie once and for all. You are not asking for too much. You are not broken for wanting more. You are not needy for longing for connection. You are human. And every human being has needs, emotional, physical, spiritual. To deny them is to deny your own humanity. To silence them is to silence your own heart. And if you silence your heart long enough, don't be surprised when it starts to go numb. But numbness is not living. And you didn't come this far just to live numb. So here's the invitation. Start asking differently. Not with him, not with explosions, not with shame, but with clarity, kindness, and courage. Instead of, "You never spend time with me," try, "I feel loved when we spend time together. Could we plan a night this week just for us?" Instead of, "I guess I'll just do it myself," try, "I'd really appreciate your help with this. Can you take care of it?" Do you see the difference? One is blame, the other is invitation. One shuts down connection, the other opens the door. And here's the beauty. When you start speaking this way, you begin to notice who walks through that door, and who doesn't. You stop wasting years waiting for people who were never going to meet you. You stop shrinking yourself for love that only exists when you're quiet. Instead, you stand tall, voice steady, heart open. And the people who belong in your life will meet you there. Not because you begged, not because you hinted, but because you asked with courage, and they chose to listen. That's the kind of love you deserve. A love where you don't have to be less to be loved. A love where your voice is not a burden but a bridge. A love where your needs aren't too much. They're welcomed, honored, and met with care. And it all begins the moment you stop believing the lie that you're asking for too much, and start believing the truth. You've simply been asking in the wrong way. Picture this. You walk into a room filled with people you love, your partner, your family, your friend. For the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you're carrying a hidden weight. You don't feel like you have to smile when you don't want to. You don't feel like you're quietly begging for scraps of attention. Instead, you feel steady, clear, confident. Why? Because you know exactly what you need, and you're no longer afraid to say it. Now imagine the shift that creates. Instead of hinting and hoping, you're speaking plainly. Instead of letting resentment build until it hardens into walls, you're addressing things when they're small, when they can still be fixed. Instead of rehearsing conversations in your head 1,000 times, you're living them in real time with honesty. Do you feel that's what freedom inside relationships feels like? That's what self-respect sounds like. And here's the part that most people overlook. This doesn't just change your relationships with others. It changes your relationship with yourself. Every time you ask clearly and directly, you're sending yourself a message. My needs matter. My voice matters. I matter. And the moment you start living from that truth, everything around you begins to align. You stop settling for You stop twisting yourself into knots to make everyone else comfortable. You stop confusing silence with strength. Because silence isn't strength. Pretending isn't love. Shrinking isn't safety. Strength is being brave enough to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. Love is being willing to listen, not just to be heard. Safety is found in spaces where your needs aren't seen as too much, but as natural and worthy of care. So take this with you. You are not asking for too much. You are asking to be understood, to be valued, to be loved in ways that honor who you really are. And there is nothing excessive about that. The world needs more people who are unafraid to stand in their truth. Not few. The people meant for you will not run from your voice. They will lean in closer. And the next time that old thought creeps in, I should keep quiet, I'll ruin everything, I'm asking for too much, I want you to stop, breathe, and remember this. You are not too much. You never were. You've simply been asking in the wrong way. And now you know how to change that. Because when you do, you don't just free your voice, you free your life.